Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel, The Bookworm. My name is Guy Estes, and I am the Bookworm. Today's topic, talking about world building, which is, of course, of great significance in fantasy and sci-fi, particularly in writing high fantasy, epic fantasy, things of that sort. And since I write fantasy, that's the one that I tend to focus on. So, really kind of one of the main aspects of world building in that genre is making it believable, making it plausible. That helps draw the reader in to the story and get immersed in the world. Now, where some writers tend to go wrong, they tend, in my opinion anyway, they tend to go a little too far in that whole world building thing. What's a sign you've gone too far in world building? If you need to include a separate appendix in your book to explain aspects of your world for your reader to understand, you went a little too far on that. Now, if you want an appendix to explain things, you don't need it. The reader can get along fine without it and understand what's going on. But if so if you want to put that appendix in there, that's fine. But if they need that extra appendix to understand what's going on, then yeah, you went a little too far. So, a couple of aspects of world building. Small scale, that would be, and again, I'm focusing on the fantasy genre, things like your creatures, your monsters, your magic systems, potions, stuff like that. That's the small scale stuff to flesh things out, and I'll talk about that more in a separate video. Today I want to talk about the large scale aspects of constructing your world, the political, economic, and social aspects of it. And while that's something you don't want to get too mired in, too bogged down in, I think you need to have some to kind of help, again, flesh things out, make this a more immersive experience for your reader. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of, okay, I've got a bachelor's degree in social studies education. My master's is in European history, so I'm coming at it from that perspective. So again, I'm looking at what's the political system, the economic system, what's the social structure, those types of things. Getting into that. So, a common framework, I guess you could say, in fantasy is medieval Europe, kind of using that as their template for their world building. And that's fine. I'm seeing more and more they are branching out into other things, Asian cultures. There's some African, there's South and Mesoamerican I've stumbled across, and that's great. That's fine. I think that's great, bringing more richness, I guess you could say, to the genre. So I tend to do the whole medieval European thing. Now, again, a common mistake, both on the part of the writer and the reader, is thinking, okay, this is based on medieval Europe, and that you're locked into that. It has to conform to historical Europe. Well, no, it doesn't, unless your story is set there. So if you're writing a historical fantasy that takes place in 14th century France, the only difference is magic is real, or werewolves and vampires are real, demons are real, that kind of thing. The church really is trying to exterminate demons and actual witches. Oh, okay, that's the fantasy aspect. But it takes place in actual 14th century France, then yes, you're locked into that and need to conform to that. But if you're just using that as a template, a springboard to create your own world, well, no, you're not locked into that. So the author is free to expand on that, change, and in fact, I strongly encourage doing that. But some readers, if they recognize that as the template, they kind of expect it to stick with that, and then things can get a little wonky when that doesn't happen. So I had a beta reader for my first novel, Triad. There was a scene where my protagonist, Alina, is playing an instrument that I described basically a dulcimer. And the beta reader said, well, dulcimers were invented in the United States in the Appalachian region and such and weren't medieval. Okay, yeah, that's true, but the technology to create a dulcimer, as far as I can tell, is no different from the technology needed to create a mandolin, a lute, a bouzouki, or any of these other medieval instruments. A hurdy-gurdy. Granted, I know nothing about making musical instruments, but a hurdy-gurdy looks to me like a fairly complicated instrument. If you got the technology to make one of those, I'm pretty sure you got the technology to make a dulcimer. So to me, there's no reason why that wouldn't work. Or I had used another thing where, she punched a guy and his teeth go, flying like castanets, was kind of the phrase I used. Well, castanets weren't around in such and such. Okay, I don't know when castanets were invented, but again, they're not exactly a high-tech item. Technologically, there's no reason they couldn't exist in this world that I created, and at any rate, it was just a simile, so not a huge deal. So sometimes they can kind of get off in those weeds, go down those particular little rabbit holes. So I just use that as, medieval Renaissance Europe as a springboard to create the world in which my stories take place, what I just informally call the chosen verse. So governments, again, if you're using medieval Europe as your template, people tend to think absolute monarchy and feudal system. That's not necessarily how it has to be. You can have an absolute monarchy, you can have a constitutional monarchy, you can have an oligarchy, you can have a direct democracy, you can have a representative democracy. All of these forms of government existed long before the modern world did. You can mix and match these things. So again, there's no reason. In fact, I strongly encourage doing that. Create your own world. Make it your own. That's one of the things that makes your stories and your books stand out, and that tends to be things that readers like. The particular readers gravitate to, oh yeah, this is really cool. I like how he did this. And go with that. So, again, not just medieval Renaissance Europe, but more specifically, one of the templates I used for my setting was medieval Switzerland, as kind of a springboard to create where my protagonists in the chosen verse live, the Artisan League. The Artisan League is a confederation of provinces on the eastern side of the continent they live on. They're united pretty much by economic interests. Okay, so the kind of the driving power in the Artisan League is the trade guilds. Pretty much every trade has some sort of guild. Even my protagonists, Alina and Beja, were forced to join a guild even though they didn't want to. The political and social and economic forces at work in their society kind of said, yeah, they were armed escort for trade caravans. You also had bounty hunters, personal bodyguards, these people who were earning livings that didn't really belong to a trade guild. Well, the forces that be in their society said, nope, these guys need to be in a guild, so formed the Adventurers Guild for these people, and they were kind of forced to join. So again, I use the medieval trade guilds as a basis for that, but again, it's not a direct copy. It doesn't have to be, you're not locked into that. So again, I'm free to kind of create things as I like, as I see fit. In creating the political climate, landscape of the Artisan League, all right, my political party, I'm registered libertarian. So for those who don't know what that is, in the United States, the Libertarian Party basically believes in minimal government. Some of them take it to the degree of full-blown anarchy, no government at all. Now, I don't go that far. There's got to be some structure in place, but I'm a big believer in that government governs best, which governs least, that government should have few and well-defined roles and really shouldn't deal with anything outside of those roles. In a nutshell, that's libertarianism. So, being a libertarian, I made the Artisan League very libertarian, but I was also very careful not to let it become a utopia. So just because this is my favored political philosophy, I realize it's not flawless, it's not perfect. It does have its flaws, it does have its weaknesses. the belief that government has minimal role. Well, another aspect of that is libertarians tend to be very big on privatization. And yeah, I'm good with privatization of some things. I don't think everything should be privatized. National defense, the military, that, dear God, no, I don't think that should be privatized. Law enforcement, just mentioning those two ideas is fairly disturbing thoughts of those being privatized. Can you imagine the horror scenarios that could result from the military being in private hands, law enforcement being in private hands? So no, I don't think it should all be privatized. The Artisan League, they don't have a standing professional army. They have a militia. And in some of my stories, the militia used, and with mixed success, which is what I think would happen in real life. Well, they're united by economics. Artisan League wields tremendous economic power. Well, they could just pay for mercenaries, right, to deal with their military aspects. Well, yes, they could. Here's the flaw with that. Mercenaries don't fight for hearth and home. They don't fight for belief. They fight for gold. What happens if your enemy offers them more gold than you do? Well, you can kiss your military goodbye is what's going to happen. They're going to join the enemy. So again, that's a flaw there. And I do have ideas for future stories and where that becomes an issue, that becomes a theme to be explored. So yes, I'm libertarian and pretty much a believer in libertarian ideals, but I also understand that's not a flawless system. You're not going to have a utopia doing that. So that also kind of gets into the political and the economic aspects of it. The religious aspects of it. Well, I'm wearing this t-shirt. You can take a pretty good guess as to what my religious beliefs are. But again, I don't try to, let me rephrase that, I try to avoid just directly transferring my religious beliefs into the world I've created in the Chosen Verse. Again, it's a template, it's a springboard. I use that as a starting point, and then from there, construct something different. But an astute reader looking at that, and in fact, I did have one reviewer did note that, a reviewer of Reckoning, note that, yep, this person has such a grasp of neo-pagan beliefs, he probably is one. Yep, she was right. But again, I do try to change things up a bit so that it's not just my beliefs, but it again, a starting point for those things. So again, those are looking at your political, economic, social structures. Those are the larger parts of it. And again, having those flaws in there, recognizing those flaws make it more plausible. They make your world more believable, and again, that helps draw the reader in. So, next video will be the smaller aspects, magic, monsters, that kind of thing. So, thank you for watching.